She's not coming back, is she? I asked the wind one morning, sitting in the same spot I had the last 42 days. My name's Willow. I'm a puppy, a little mixed breed with ears too big for my head and paws that still trip over each other when I run too fast. I didn't always sit outside the shelter. I used to live in a warm house with a girl who had curly hair and sang to me every night before bed. Her name was Callie, but one day she stopped singing. The house grew quiet. Then I was taken away by people who smelled like sadness. They put me in a room full of cages and barking, and the girl never came back. The first week, I howled until my throat hurt. I scratched at the gate. I waited. But when they let me out for a walk and I saw the door, I bolted. I sat outside on the gravel path leading to the parking lot. I thought maybe if I stayed right there, she'd see me if she ever returned. Every time the big glass door opened, my ears perked up, my tail thumped. I hoped. Then it wasn't her, and I'd curl back into a tight ball. It wasn't that the people inside didn't care. They gave me food and water and soft towels to lie on. But inside, I couldn't breathe right. The walls pressed in. There were too many smells, too much noise. Out here, I could smell the wind. I could listen to the cars, the birds, the crunch of footsteps on the gravel. Every day, volunteers passed by and tried to coax me back in. I'd let them pet me, maybe take a bite of a treat from their hand. But then I'd walk back to my spot, tail tucked low, head down. Some of the others whispered that I was broken. A volunteer named Lynn liked to sit near me sometimes. She'd bring a folding chair and read out loud. Her voice was gentle. She wore her long gray hair in a braid, and she always smelled like peanut butter. One day she said, "You're just waiting, huh, Willow? Waiting for something that might never come." I blinked up at her. She reached down, rubbed behind my ears. "But sometimes," she continued, "waiting changes things." On the 43rd morning, it rained. The clouds came rolling in before the sun had even gotten warm. Most dogs hate rain, but I didn't mind it much. It kept people inside. It was quiet. But that day, something different happened. A car pulled in, slow and steady, not the usual kind, no stickers or crates or wagging tails peering out the back. It was an old blue sedan, the kind that wheezes when it stops. And it parked farther away than usual, near the trees. A man got out. He wore a long green coat, faded at the edges. His hair was white like snow, and he moved like he was made of old wood, careful and creaky. He walked with a cane, but not the kind that clinks on the ground. His made a soft tap, like he was afraid to wake something. He didn't come to the door. He didn't even look at the shelter sign. He just stood there in the rain, staring at me. I stared back. He didn't smile or kneel or whistle. He just watched. And then, slowly, he sat down on the ground, right there, in the puddles. I tilted my head. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small metal tin, opened it, pulled out a piece of jerky, not the dry kind from the shelter. This smelled smoky, real. My nose twitched. He held it out. Didn't say a word. I didn't move at first, just watched the rain drip from his coat. His hands were big, old, speckled. He didn't shake them or wave them or try to call me over, just held the piece of jerky in an open palm. After a while, I stood, took a few steps, then a few more. The jerky was still there. So was he. I took it, chewed, swallowed. He didn't reach out or try to grab me. Then I sat down beside him. We sat like that for a while. The rain eased up. A bird called from a tree. Somewhere inside, a dog barked and was hushed. He finally spoke. "You got someone missing too?" I didn't understand the words, but his voice was low and kind, like the hum of something you forgot you loved. He pulled a small square of cloth from his pocket and dried his hands. Then he touched the top of my head. My boy used to wait like that. Every day he'd sit by the window, even when he was sick. Said the birds kept him company. I leaned into his touch. He didn't stay long. When he stood, he groaned a little, looked down at me. "I'll be back tomorrow, pup. Same time. You saved me a spot." Then he left. But he came back. Every morning. Same coat. Same tin of jerky. Sometimes he talked. Sometimes he didn't. I always waited. The staff took notice. Lynn smiled at me one afternoon and said, "Looks like you found someone new to wait for." His name was Walter. He used to be a teacher, lived alone now, just him and a porch full of rocking chairs. He never asked me to come with him, never tried to drag me in. Just sat, shared his snacks, and told quiet stories about birds and rivers and a dog he had once named Penny. One day, Lynn came out with a towel and a cup of something hot for Walter. "You two are something else," she said. Walter just chuckled. "She's got patience. That's rare these days." He scratched behind my ear. I wagged my tail just once. The seasons started to change. The air grew crisper. Leaves turned gold and red. Walter brought a thicker blanket to sit on. I curled beside him more often. One morning, he arrived coughing, a rough, deep sound that made his shoulders shake. He didn't stay long that day, just gave me 2 pieces of jerky and said, "Might miss a day or two, pup. Don't go running off." He was gone for 5 days. Each morning I waited, staring toward the tree line, ears twitching at every sound. The staff brought me inside at night, but I was back at my spot at dawn. On the 6th day, his car rolled in, slower than usual. When he stepped out, he looked thinner, wore a scarf around his neck, but he smiled when he saw me. "Told you I'd be back." We sat in silence. I pressed against his side. His hand rested gently on my back. The sun peeked through the clouds. That day, Lynn came out and sat across from us. She didn't speak for a while. Then she said, "Walter, you know you could take her home. She's bonded with you. We all see it." Walter looked down at me. "I don't know if I'd be enough for her." Lynn's voice was soft. "You already are." He didn't say anything then, just looked at the horizon. The next morning, he brought a leash. It was old leather, cracked in places, but it smelled familiar, like dust and wood and something steady. He held it out. Didn't clip it on, just let me sniff. "Only if you want to, pup." I stood, moved closer, nuzzled his hand. He looped it gently around my neck. We walked slowly to his car. He opened the back door. I hesitated, then jumped in. He drove with the windows cracked. I stuck my head out, letting the wind rush past. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the tightness in my chest. The road stretched ahead like a quiet promise. His house was small, a porch with chipped paint, a wind chime that tinkled like distant laughter. He let me explore every room. There was a couch with a blanket, a bowl already waiting, a basket with toys worn soft by time. That night, He sat in a rocking chair and read out loud. His voice was slower than Lynn's, but just as calm. I lay at his feet, eyes half closed. He looked down and said, "You can stay as long as you like." I thumped my tail once, then again. The days passed. I learned his routine. He made toast every morning and always shared the crust. He whistled when he worked in the garden. He talked to the pictures on the mantel. I barked at the mail truck once, and he laughed so hard he had to sit down. Sometimes he sat quiet, looking at the sky. Sometimes he cried. I curled up beside him then, pressed my nose to his knee. He always reached down and stroked my ears. He took me back to the shelter once to visit. Lynn cried when she saw us. "She looks like a different dog," she whispered. "So do I," Walter said. That night, back on the porch, he looked at me and said, "Funny thing about waiting. Sometimes it brings you just what you needed." I wagged my tail, but I still watched the road sometimes, just in case. Not because I didn't love where I was, but because part of me still remembered the girl with curly hair, the one who sang. Walter understood. One day he said, "Some things stay in our hearts even when they're gone. Doesn't mean we stop living." And we didn't. We lived every day, slowly, gently, together, me and the man who sat in the rain. But that was only the beginning. Because what I didn't know then was that Walter had a plan bigger than toast and bedtime stories, one that would lead us back to the shelter and change everything, not just for me, but for so many others still waiting on that gravel path. Walter's plan started on a Tuesday morning, the kind where the sky looked painted on, bright and crisp, with the smell of leaves still clinging to the air. He brewed his coffee slower than usual, humming under his breath, while I followed him from the kitchen to the porch. He looked at me, a twinkle behind the smudged lenses of his glasses, and said, "We've got work to do, pup." He didn't say more, just sipped his coffee and scratched behind my ears while the sun stretched across the yard. That afternoon, he opened a drawer in the hallway and pulled out an old photo album. The cover was cracked, and the pages smelled like cedar. He flipped through slowly, stopping every so often to tap a picture with his finger. Some were black and white. Some had edges that curled up. There were faces I didn't recognize, children with bright eyes and crooked grins, a younger Walter beside a woman with strong shoulders and laughter caught mid-smile. "She would have loved you," he said, tapping her photo. She had a soft spot for the ones who got left behind. That evening, he brought out a notebook, the spiral kind with a faded cover, and started writing lists. I watched from the rug while he scribbled names, addresses, things I didn't understand. He muttered to himself. "Old fairgrounds? Still open? That trailer park off Lakeview? What's her name again?" The next morning, he made phone calls. His voice was steady but carried a kind of warmth that made people stay on the line. He talked about the shelter, about how many dogs were waiting, about me, about second chances. He spoke to a woman named Carla who worked at the town paper. "You still print that Saturday column, don't you? Thought maybe folks around here would like to know about Willow, about what comes from not giving up." He talked to someone named Mitch who ran a hardware store. "You ever think about sponsoring adoptions? One a month, maybe. Help a pup find a porch to call home." The calls kept coming. He wrote down names, circled dates. His energy wore him out some days, but I could see something shifting, a light behind his eyes. One afternoon, Lynn visited. She brought a folder with her and sat at the kitchen table. I curled under Walter's chair while they talked. You really think it'll work? She asked. I think if folks see it, see what it means to be chosen, to matter again, they might stop walking past so quick. She opened the folder. Inside were photos of dogs, notes, names, and intake dates. Walter flipped through, slow and deliberate. He paused at a picture of an old beagle with cloudy eyes. That one's been there almost a year, Lynn said. Sweet as anything, but no one wants a senior. Maybe we start with him, Walter said. That weekend, we went back to the shelter. I hadn't been inside since I left. My paws hesitated at the door. The smells rushed at me, fear, bleach, longing. But Walter's hand rested on my head. Just visiting, pup. Nothing more. The staff smiled when they saw us. Some crouched to greet me. I sniffed fingers, nudged palms. Walter asked to see the beagle. They brought him out, slow and shaky, his ears dragging like they carried the weight of time. His name was Jerry. Walter sat on the floor, just like he had with me. Jerry sniffed him, then settled beside him with a groan. We'll tell his story, Walter said. People need to know that quiet love matters too. He didn't take Jerry home, not yet. But he asked Lynn to write down every detail. Age, favorite treat, the way he sighs when he sleeps. Walter spent the next few days writing, not just facts, stories. He wrote about Jerry's gentle spirit, about his slow tail wags, about the way he watched people like he still hoped someone was coming back. Then he drove to the town paper and handed in the story. It ran that Saturday, a full page, a picture of Jerry leaning against Walter's knee. By Monday, Jerry had a home. A woman named Darlene, who wore boots with little sunflowers stitched on the sides, walked into the shelter holding the newspaper. She pointed to the picture. I want him. That one. The staff cried. Walter sat on the porch with his hands folded and said nothing for a while, just watched the wind rustle the trees. Then he turned to me. One down. And so it began. Every week, Walter wrote another story about shy dogs and scruffy ones, dogs who flinched at loud sounds, dogs who used to belong to someone once. He called it the Porch Project, because every dog deserves a place to sit, to watch the world, to know their home. He used his own porch for pictures. People started noticing. Folks at the store would say, I saw that pup in the paper, or that hound looked just like my granddad's old dog. Businesses pitched in. Mitch from the hardware store started covering adoption fees for one dog a month. Carla added a feature called From the Porch in every Saturday paper. Some days were quiet. Some dogs took longer. Some stories didn't get a response for weeks. But Walter kept writing, and I stayed by his side. The shelter changed too. More volunteers showed up. Lynn said people came because they read Walter's words and felt something shift inside them. More visitors meant more eyes, more chances. One day, Walter brought home a small wooden sign, painted it himself. It read, Porch Project HQ. He nailed it to the railing. That night, we sat on the steps as the sun dipped low. You know, Willow, he said, sometimes I think I needed this more than they did. He looked older that evening. The air was colder, sharp. He didn't eat much that night. The next day, he stayed in bed longer. His cough was worse. I lay beside him, head on his chest, listening to the rattle in his breath. He still wrote that week. Took longer, but he finished the story. This one was about a shepherd mix named Bramble. Nervous around men, but gentle with kids. The photo showed Bramble curled on Walter's porch beside me. The story ran, and Bramble found a home. Walter smiled when they told him, whispered, "That's the way." But that night, he didn't get out of bed. The nurse who visited sometimes came early the next morning. She moved quietly, her face tight. I stayed close. Walter was okay for a while, tired but still scribbling, still petting my head with slow hands. "If something happens, pup," he said one day, "you keep watching that road. Someone else might need you next." I licked his hand. The shelter staff started visiting more. Lynn brought soup. Carla dropped off groceries. People mailed letters to the house. Thank yous. Pictures of dogs on porches. Some included kids, holding the dogs close. Some were just the dogs, their faces relaxed, eyes soft. Walter pinned them to the wall above his desk. "Look at that, Willow. That's what hope looks like." And then one evening, he didn't wake up. The nurse sat quietly beside him. Lynn held his hand. I stayed at his feet. No one said much. Just silence. Gentle, deep silence. They wrapped him in his favorite blanket. Put a photo of Penny in his pocket. One of me, too. They left the front door open for a while. The wind came through. The chimes sang. I stayed on the porch that night. The next morning, Lynn returned. "Come on, girl," she said. "Let's go." I followed her to the car. Not because I wanted to leave, but because Walter told me someone else might need me. Back at the shelter, people greeted me with quiet voices and open arms. They set up a corner just for me, a bed that smelled faintly of cedar, a picture of Walter on the wall, a box of his old notebooks. Carla came one afternoon, sat beside me. "We're going to keep the Porch Project going. You'll be part of it, won't you?" I didn't understand the words, but I rested my head on her knee. That Saturday, the paper ran a tribute. A photo of Walter on the porch, me beside him. The headline read, "The Man Who Waited in the Rain." And below it, a new story. About a dog named Junie, a spaniel mix with anxiety. The first story not written by Walter, but it had his voice. More letters came, more photos. People sent small donations. Others asked how they could help. Mitch added a bench outside the shelter, engraved it, for the ones still waiting. Every week, a new story, a new porch, a new home. I started greeting the new dogs, sat with them outside, watched the cars, let them lean on me if they needed to. The staff said I had become the soul of the Porch Project, that I carried Walter's spirit in my quiet watchfulness. But I was still waiting, still scanning the road. Not for Callie. I understood now that she wasn't coming back, but for something else. Because Walter had told me that waiting doesn't mean stopping. It means holding space for what's possible. And I held that space every morning. Then one day, a new car pulled in. Not the kind that screeched or sputtered. This one glided. And from it stepped a girl with curly hair. Not Callie, taller, older, but her eyes held the same softness. She knelt beside me, reached out, didn't rush. "Hi," she said. "He wrote about you. Every week, my grandpa, Walter." I pressed into her hand. She looked at the shelter, then back at me. "I've been gone a long time. But I'm here now, and I want to help. That night, she sat on the porch bench, read one of Walter's stories aloud. Her voice shook a little, but I sat beside her, because I knew what it meant to wait. And I knew what it meant when someone finally saw you, even in the quiet, even after the rain. The girl with curly hair came every morning after that. Her name was June. I liked her voice, soft, unsure at first, but steadier each day. She wore big boots with red laces and a backpack that jingled when she walked. The first time she sat on the bench, she took out one of Walter's notebooks and held it with both hands like it might fall apart if she wasn't careful. "I don't know what I'm doing," she told me, "but I know he wanted this to keep going. So, I guess that means I try." She read the stories out loud to herself, sometimes pausing to scribble notes or underline a line that made her stop and smile. I stayed nearby, curled at her feet, occasionally glancing up when the wind caught a page. One morning she brought a camera, not a phone, an actual camera, black and boxy, with a strap covered in little pins. She crouched beside a pit bull named Dolly, who was terrified of loud sounds and hid in the corner of her kennel most days. June sat there for an hour, not taking a single picture, just waiting. She whispered things I couldn't hear, her hand resting palm up in front of her. Eventually, Dolly crept forward, touched her nose to June's fingers, and sat. Click. The next week, Dolly's story appeared in the paper. June had written it. It wasn't as smooth as Walter's, but it had heart. She described Dolly's shy smile, her twitchy ears, her need for slow mornings and quiet rooms. And at the end, she wrote, "She doesn't want a circus. She just wants a corner of the world that's hers." 2 days later, Dolly went home with a quiet man who worked nights and liked to fish. He brought her a blanket that smelled like riverbanks and patience. June cried in the staff room when she heard. "I didn't think I could do it," she whispered, wiping her nose with her sleeve. Lynn patted her shoulder. "You're not doing it alone." They hung Dolly's picture on the new bulletin board beside Walter's photo. A sign above read, "Dogs who found their porch." As winter settled in, the mornings grew colder. Frost clung to the edges of the bench. June started bringing a thermos of hot cocoa. She'd pour a little into a bowl for me to sniff, though I preferred the jerky sticks she still brought in her bag. More dogs came in. Some were scared. Some barked nonstop. Others curled into balls and didn't move for hours. June gave them all names if they didn't have one already. She sat with each of them, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. She took notes, drew doodles in the margins. She never rushed. She started running the Porch Project social page. A volunteer named Tyler helped with videos. They made clips of the dogs on the porch, walking in the leaves, watching birds. Sometimes I was in them, wagging slowly, always nearby. June showed me the screen once. "You're kind of famous, you know. People ask about you all the time." I didn't understand, but I wagged anyway. She leaned in. "They say you're the heart of this place." People began showing up asking for the dogs in the videos. They brought blankets, food, toys. One girl even brought a painting of me and Walter on the porch. It hung above the desk where June wrote. Still, not every story had a quick ending. Some dogs waited longer. One, a hound mix named Lenny, paced his kennel constantly. He'd lived on a chain for most of his life, and freedom made him nervous. June spent weeks sitting outside his kennel, reading aloud. He never came close. Then, one snowy morning, she set her book aside and just sat. I sat beside her. After a long time, Lenny approached. His tail stayed tucked, but he sniffed her hand. June didn't move. He pressed his head gently against her knee. She whispered, "That's it. That's the start." His story ran in the paper 2 weeks later. It was simple, honest. She didn't dress it up. She wrote, "He's not perfect, but he's trying. Every day. And he deserves a home that sees that." It took 3 weeks, but he found one. A retired woman named Nancy came in, printed story in hand. "He reminds me of myself," she said. "I don't trust easy either." The shelter held a little celebration. June brought cupcakes. One had a paw print drawn in icing. That night, she sat on the porch bench with me. "He would have been so proud," she whispered. Her fingers rested lightly on the notebook in her lap. More stories followed. A trio of scruffy terriers who'd lived under a porch together. A husky with one eye who adored classical music. A lab mix who refused to sleep unless someone sang to her. Each found a home. June started hosting reading days at the shelter. Children came, sat in the kennels with books, and read to the dogs. The sound of little voices made even the most anxious dogs perk up. Parents lingered. Some filled out forms. Tyler filmed it all. The video went viral. People wrote in from other states. Some drove hours to visit. Others asked how to start their own version. June began mailing out copies of Walter's original notebook pages. She wrote a guide, Starting Your Own Porch, and sent it to shelters who asked. The town paper gave her a monthly column. She added a bulletin board in the lobby, a timeline. On it, photos of every dog adopted through the Porch Project, starting with Jerry. But not all moments were light. Some dogs didn't make it. Illness, age, trauma too deep to undo. June sat with them when the time came. She whispered their names. She wrote about them anyway, honored them. Even if their porch wasn't forever, she said once, they still mattered. They still felt love. One dog, a small mutt named Rags, passed in his sleep the night before his adoption. June found his story in Walter's old drafts. She read it aloud at the next team meeting. Some souls don't stay long, but while they're here, they remind us to notice the small things, the tilt of the sun, the sound of leaves, the warmth of a hand. Rags reminded us. Everyone cried. Then they baked biscuits in his honor and handed them out to visitors. The seasons turned again. Spring brought rain and green and longer walks. I still sat on the porch, but now I had company. Another dog had joined us, Max, a big, gentle golden who'd been returned 3 times for being too much work. He snored louder than thunder and loved belly rubs. June called us her porch guardians. They greet the new ones, she explained to a visitor. Help them understand this place is safe. Tyler added a wooden gate around the porch, making it a proper space. Volunteers painted flowers on the posts. Someone donated wind chimes. Another brought a small birdhouse. The porch became more than a place. It became a promise. That summer, June was invited to speak at a conference for shelters. She stood on stage in a blazer 2 sizes too big and read from Walter's notebook. He believed that waiting was not weakness, it was faith. That even the most forgotten dog still had something to give. The room stood and clapped. When she returned, she brought home a new idea. A mobile porch, she said, setting down a stack of plans. We bring the dogs to town events, farmers markets, schools. Let people meet them where they are. The shelter raised funds. A local mechanic volunteered his services. Tyler painted the van. On the side, big letters read, Porch Project on the go. Inside, soft blankets, fans, treats. Just a few dogs at a time, each with a handler. Each with a story printed and laminated. The first event was a street fair. People stopped constantly. That's the dog from the paper. Is this Willow? Oh my gosh, my kids love her. June smiled through it all, answered questions, passed out cards, took down names. 2 dogs were adopted that day. By fall, there were 10 porch projects across the state. Walter's name appeared on a plaque in the shelter lobby, and on a quiet Tuesday morning, June sat beside me, notebook in hand. I think we need to tell your story now, she said. I looked at her, waited. People know your face. They know you waited, but they don't know what that means. Not really. She opened a fresh page. Walter found you, but you saved him too. And now, you're helping others. They need to know that. She read the first lines aloud. She waited outside the shelter every day, rain or shine, ears perked, eyes full of questions. And then, someone saw her. I leaned against her side, because I understood. Every waiting heart is just one glance away from being known, and sometimes the right porch is closer than you think. The morning the letter came, June found it wedged between 2 copies of the town newspaper and a flyer for discounted mulch. The envelope was thick, hand-addressed in blue ink that looped gently across the front. There was no return address, just a single paw print sticker holding the flap shut. She paused before opening it, standing just outside the shelter's front door with the sunlight curling around her boots and the quiet rustle of willow leaves overhead. I waited beside her, tail swishing slowly on the wooden porch. When she slid the letter free and began reading, her breath caught. I didn't understand the words, but I knew that stillness, knew it well. It was the same way Walter had gone quiet before reading something that mattered. She crouched next to me. It's from someone in Indiana. Said they read the column about Dolly last year and started their own little project. They have a church group fostering dogs now. They even built their own porch. She laughed then, a soft, astonished sound, like something bright cracking through a heavy wall. They call it the Steps of Grace. Can you believe that? More letters followed. A group in Vermont had started weekly shelter walks. Another in Oregon ran dog and book pairing events at their library. A couple from Texas had turned their ranch into a senior dog sanctuary, all inspired by a single story in a small town paper. June began pinning these letters to a new wallboard in the shelter hallway. Above it, she hung a wooden sign, carved carefully by hand. The porch went traveling. The shelter buzzed with new energy. More volunteers showed up, people who had never owned pets before, but had seen something in a story that moved them. They brought blankets, old coats, even hand-knit sweaters. Some brought food or asked to walk the dogs. A few just wanted to sit and read out loud. June kept writing, but now she had help. A woman named Sherry joined her, a former English teacher with a soft voice and silver hair always pulled into a messy bun. They met every Wednesday afternoon in the corner of the staff room, stacks of notes and coffee mugs between them. Walter would have loved her, June whispered to me once as I rested under the table, half listening to the scribble of pens and the clink of sugar spoons. Tyler, too, had grown into his role. He'd bought a better camera, learned how to edit with soft fades and gentle piano music. His videos now reached people far beyond our town. He made a short film about the Porch Project, just 5 minutes long, but it showed me, the bench, June with her notebook, and faces of the dogs who'd come and gone. The video went farther than any of them imagined. A national morning show picked it up. They sent a crew to film a segment. Reporters asked questions. June stood in front of the shelter wearing her porch pin and spoke carefully, her words slow and thoughtful. This isn't about just one place. It's about noticing the ones who've been overlooked, giving them time, giving them presence. That's what Walter taught us. When the segment aired, donations surged. Boxes of supplies arrived from strangers. One day, a check came in for $10,000 from a woman in Maine who wrote, "I lost my husband last year. I sat on the porch every morning with our old hound for months, reading the stories you posted. I think you saved me." The shelter used the money to expand the outdoor area, adding a second porch with heated pads for winter and shade sails for summer. They called it Willow's Wing, my wing. I didn't understand at first, but when June led me over to the freshly stained floorboards, the smell of pine thick in the air, I saw a brass plate near the corner. To the dog who waited and helped others find their way. I wagged, slowly, thoughtfully. Then I lay down in the sun while children painted flowers on the fence. As spring unfurled into a gentle summer, the pace didn't slow. The mobile porch traveled farther. They visited retirement homes, community fairs, even a college campus during finals week. Max came along most days, still snoring loudly on the ride. But he'd learned to stay close, especially to the more nervous dogs. One day, a girl named Elise came to visit. She was 11 and walked with a quiet limp, a metal brace on one leg. Her eyes were sharp, though, and she carried a little notebook just like June's. She visited every Tuesday afternoon, sat on a pillow by the kennels, and read to a beagle mix named Poppy. Poppy didn't respond at first. She trembled constantly and had chewed the edges of her blanket down to threads. But Elise never stopped coming. She brought peanut butter treats and read fantasy novels in a calm, even voice. Weeks passed. One Tuesday, Elise reached the end of a chapter and paused. Poppy stepped forward, pressed her nose to Elise's wrist. June saw it from the hallway. Her hands flew to her mouth. They ran Poppy's story in the paper that weekend. Elise helped write it. "She's like me," Elise wrote. "Some days are harder, but we both know how to wait." A family adopted Poppy soon after, an older couple with a quiet home and 2 grown sons who promised to send updates. Elise cried happy tears. More children started visiting the shelter. A program began. Reading to rest. Teachers brought whole classes, rotated each week. The dogs relaxed. So did the kids. One afternoon, June brought out a box of old photos she'd found tucked in a cabinet behind Walter's old chair. Photos of the early days. Some of me as a smaller pup, ears too big, eyes always watching. She laid them out on the floor and began sorting them. "We should make a book," she said quietly. "Something they can hold, something that lasts." She and Sherry got to work. They selected the best stories, the best pictures, wrote a foreword together. This isn't a beginning or an end. This is what happens when you choose to see. The book came out in late fall. It was called Porchlight. People ordered it from all over. June mailed each one herself, slipping a bookmark into every copy. Wooden slats, laser engraved with tiny paw prints. Evenings on the porch remained sacred. She and I still sat out there. Sometimes with Max, sometimes with one of the new dogs who needed to learn how to just be. She talked to me in low murmurs, about her fears, about how she still missed Walter, how sometimes, even now, she didn't feel ready. "You make me brave," she told me one night, "just by being here." She leaned her head on mine. I stayed still. More than a year had passed since the day she first stepped from that car, since she first knelt beside me and whispered hello, and she still came every day. That winter, a storm swept through town, the worst in 5 years. The shelter lost power for 2 nights. Snow piled thick and heavy. The staff camped out in the lobby, wrapped in coats, feeding the dogs by flashlight. June stayed the entire time. She curled with me and Max in the corner, while wind howled outside. "It's okay," she whispered. "We're safe. We're warm. We're together." When power returned, she looked at the shelter with new eyes. "We need a generator," she said. "We need to be ready next time." A fundraiser launched that week. The goal was 10,000. They raised 12. The shelter bought the generator and installed better insulation. Every small thing became part of something bigger. The porch never felt quiet anymore. It felt alive, filled with memory, with purpose. And every dog who sat there with me, they weren't just waiting. They were learning to hope. Hope, after all, was something that could be taught. One story at a time, and I stayed, always watching the road, because someone was always coming, sometimes for the dogs, sometimes for themselves. Either way, they always found what they didn't know they needed, just like Walter did, just like June, just like me. June always said the porch was more than just a place. It was an idea, something that moved with people, something that grew the moment someone sat still long enough to care. And by the time the second spring rolled around, it was clear that the idea had taken root far beyond anything she or Walter could have imagined. It started with postcards, dozens of them, some with dog faces, others with landscapes, barns, beaches, snowy yards, each one handwritten. They arrived from Iowa, Colorado, even as far as Alaska. People shared stories of dogs they adopted after reading about the Porch Project, of porches they'd built, benches they'd carved, quiet moments they had learned to notice. One man wrote, "We added a little wooden bench under the oak tree in our backyard and called it Walter's Rest. I sit there every morning with my mutt, Ted. He's half blind and snores like a chainsaw. I wouldn't trade him for anything." Another said, "My son and I built a porch at the shelter in our town. We didn't have much, but it's painted green and has flower pots. The dogs take turns out there. It's their moment of peace, June hung a world map in the shelter hallway and started pinning red flags to every place a postcard came from. Soon, the map was dotted like a galaxy. Each flag a little spark, a moment when someone chose to care. Meanwhile, things at the shelter kept moving. New dogs arrived each week. Some were left at the gate before sunrise. Others brought in by kind strangers who'd found them shivering under steps or wandering fields. Each one was scared in their own way, and each one found their way to the porch. Max remained my steady companion. He'd grown grayer, slower. His joints clicked when he stood, and he snored louder than ever. But the younger dogs loved him. They followed him like he was the oldest tree in a forest, a steadying presence. He let them chew on his ears, lean on him when the world felt too loud. June's routines didn't change. She arrived early, stayed late. She met every new dog with patience and a soft voice. She brought me and Max treats, sat with us when the sun dipped low, and wrote until her hand cramped. One afternoon, she received a call from a nearby city's mayor's office. They wanted to recognize the Porch Project publicly. A local award, a ceremony. June said she didn't need a plaque. She just wanted more adoptions. The mayor laughed and said they could do both. At the ceremony, held in the town's community center, June stood at a small podium beside a display board filled with dog portraits. She didn't prepare a speech. She didn't need to. She looked out at the audience. Foster parents, adopters, volunteers, strangers who had followed the stories. And she said, "This began with one dog who waited, and one man who sat down beside her. Everything else came from that." They gave her a key to the city. She looked at it, a bit bewildered, and said later, "I guess we're unlocking more porches now." Back at the shelter, the work continued. New programs began. One helped seniors find older dogs. Another connected veterans with dogs needing structure and long walks. A third partnered with a local middle school, letting students design adoption posters and read to shy pups. The mobile porch van got a sibling, an old school bus donated by the district. Volunteers painted it with wagging tails and trees. Inside, they built crates with soft blankets and little signs that read, "This is your ride to forever." June dubbed it the Porch Express. It became a traveling storybook. Wherever it went, people came. Kids held signs, families brought bowls and leashes, and the dogs sat proudly behind their windows. But even in the midst of all the growth, June never stopped coming to the porch. Every morning, she sat with me and Max. She brought a thermos of mint tea in summer, cinnamon cocoa in fall. She read us the letters she received. She told us about the dogs who had gone on to do incredible things. One who became a therapy dog at a children's hospital. Another who lived with a deaf teenager and learned to respond to sign language. "You're part of all this," she'd whisper, scratching behind my ear. "You and Walter started something that just keeps rippling." One late spring afternoon, as the sun stretched golden across the field beyond the shelter, a car pulled into the lot. It wasn't remarkable. An old blue hatchback, dusty from the road. But something in June shifted when she saw it. She stood slowly, eyes narrowing. I followed her gaze. A woman stepped out. She had dark blonde curls, tied back now, and wore a denim jacket. Her hands shook slightly as she closed the car door. She walked carefully, like every step was measured. June didn't move. The woman looked up, met her gaze, and said, I think that's her." My ears twitched. I tilted my head. June nodded. "Willow?" I stood. The woman knelt. Her scent was familiar, like sun-dried cotton and a faint trace of apples. She looked at me. Her eyes brimmed. "It's Callie," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." June stepped back. "Let us have the moment." Callie reached out, but didn't touch me yet. She looked older now, tired in the way people get when time folds in on itself. Her fingers trembled. "I never stopped thinking about you. Not once." I took a slow step forward, then another. She held her breath. I pressed my nose into her hand. She cried. Not loud, not messy, just a steady release like rain that had waited too long to fall. June approached quietly. "You want to sit?" Callie nodded. They sat on the porch, me between them. "My parents," Callie began, then stopped. There was so much going on back then. I was a kid. They moved. I didn't have a say. I begged them to bring you, but they didn't listen. I tried to come back, but by then, June said nothing, just waited. I saw the article, with your picture, Callie whispered. I couldn't believe it. I drove 6 hours. She looked at me. You remembered, didn't you? I leaned against her leg. Her hand stroked my fur, slow and reverent. We stayed like that until the sun dipped behind the trees. Callie didn't ask to take me, didn't beg forgiveness. She just sat, let the moment be what it was. When she finally stood to leave, she kissed my head. You found your place, I can see that. June walked her to her car. They spoke quietly. I couldn't hear, but when June returned, she knelt beside me. She wants to visit sometimes, not to take anything, just to be part of it. I think we can make room for that. I thumped my tail once. A week later, Callie returned with a box of books. She joined the reading program. The kids liked her gentle voice. The dogs did too. She sat on the porch when June couldn't, always beside me, always quiet. One evening, after the last dog had been walked and Max was snoring softly behind us, Callie said, "This place, it's like a heart, always beating, always pulling people in." June nodded. That's what happens when someone chooses to wait. The porch continued. The letters, the dogs, the stories, a never-ending current. And every day, I stayed by that bench, eyes on the road, tail resting quietly against the wood. Not because I was waiting to be rescued, but because I had become the one who helped others know they were seen. And I would be there always, for whoever came next. The porch looked different in early summer. The boards had darkened slightly from rain and sun, the varnish wearing soft from all the feet that passed over it. There were new flowers in the planters, bright yellow zinnias and tall blue cornflowers that swayed with every breeze. The wind chimes sang their usual song. Birds nested nearby. Bees buzzed lazily. It was a season of stillness, but also of movement, like the whole world was stretching after a long nap. I had grown slower in those months, not quite old, but older. I felt it in my legs after long days. I napped more often, but I still came to the porch each morning. I still waited. June noticed the changes. She brought an extra cushion for me to lie on, kept a bowl of cool water nearby. She started brushing my coat more regularly, humming as she worked, letting the hair float away in little clouds. "You're still the heart of this place," she whispered, "even when you rest more than you roam." Max rested too. We often lay together side by side on the warm wood, watching as volunteers moved in and out of the shelter. He groaned when he stood sometimes, but his eyes stayed sharp, always watching the younger dogs, ready to nudge or soothe as needed. That month, a new dog arrived who reminded me of myself. She was smaller, wiry, with a patch of missing fur along her side and eyes that didn't quite meet yours when you looked at her. Her name was Penny. She didn't bark, didn't growl, just watched. From corners, from shadows. She made herself invisible in the most visible ways. June noticed. She sat outside Penny's kennel every afternoon, brought treats but didn't push them, read out loud, left the kennel door open and sat just beyond it. She did this for a week, then 2, then 3. One morning, Penny stepped onto the porch. Her paws moved like she was crossing a river full of uncertain stones. She came near me and Max, then sat. Not close, but near enough. Her ears flicked toward every sound, her back never fully relaxed. June looked up from her book, smiled, said nothing. It took another week for Penny to lie down. 2 more before she accepted a treat from a visitor's hand. But she did. Bit by bit, her silence shifted from fear to watchfulness. Her story went in the paper. June wrote, "She won't be the one who rushes into your arms. But one day, when the light's right and the house is quiet, she'll come sit beside you, and you'll know you've earned something precious." The story ran on a Friday. On Sunday, a woman named Beverly drove 2 hours from the mountains. She arrived wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat and carrying a folded quilt in her arms. She met Penny, sat with her, waited. By evening, she filled out the forms. She left the quilt behind for Penny to sleep on until she could return to pick her up. The porch felt a little lighter the next day. In late June, a group of teenagers from a summer program came to volunteer. They helped repaint the shelter's fences, built a ramp for the older dogs, and took turns reading on the porch. One of them, a boy named Jacob, had trouble speaking. He used a small device to communicate, pressing buttons that voiced his words in a gentle tone. He was paired with a scrappy mutt named Trisket, who had a limp and only one eye. Trisket didn't care how Jacob spoke. He followed him everywhere. One afternoon, Jacob sat on the porch with Trisket curled up beside him. He typed slowly into his device, then hit play. "He is my friend." The porch was quiet for a long moment. Later, June added a photo of Jacob and Trisket to the wall inside, just beneath the carved sign. She wrote, "Friendship doesn't care how it's spoken." The map of red pins had grown so crowded that June added a second board. This one was shaped like a paw. It tracked shelters starting their own porches. Each pin was a place where dogs were being given time and story and hope. An email came from a librarian in Minnesota. She wanted to host a national Porch Project Day, encourage people across the country to sit on porches with shelter dogs, read to them, post pictures. June smiled when she read it. "We'll call it Walter's Day," she said. Planning began. Flyers were made. Schools were contacted. Bookstores offered discounts on animal-themed books. June reached out to every Porch Project contact across the map. The day arrived in mid-July. From sunrise to sunset, porches filled. Photos flooded in. Dogs curled on rocking chairs, noses in books, heads in laps. Children read. Adults sat still. Quietness became action. At the shelter, the event drew a crowd. Tents were set up. Max and I had our own shaded corner where visitors came to sit with us, take photos, ask about the early days. Callie came too. She read a story aloud to a group of children, then joined me on the porch. "You started all this," she whispered. "You just sat and waited. And now look." I rested my head against her foot. That night, the staff gathered on the porch. June read from Walter's notebook. He once said that the hardest thing in the world was choosing to stay, to wait, when everything tells you to give up. But he also said that's where love is, in the waiting, in the watching, in the quiet choice to believe something better might be coming. They lit small candles, one for every dog adopted in the last year. The porch glowed with soft light. Moths danced. The wind stilled. In the weeks that followed, the porch remained steady. A boy named Connor adopted a hound who was missing half an ear. An elderly man named Fred came every Thursday to walk dogs and sit by the garden. He brought biscuits in a rusted tin and always wore the same flannel shirt. He told June one day, "I lost my wife 2 years ago. Couldn't stand the silence. But this place? It talks without speaking. I feel her here." She hugged him. Fred adopted a tiny terrier with a crooked tail, named her Dot. She followed him like his shadow. Life settled again. Not still. Never still. But steady. And every morning, I still made my way to the porch. Even when my legs hurt. Even when the path seemed longer. I lay on my cushion, watched the cars, greeted the new dogs, let them know they weren't alone. Because the waiting never ends. Not really. There's always someone out there, always someone coming, and I would be there when they arrived. In early August, the days turned golden. The sun hung lower, casting long shadows that slipped across the shelter lawn like reaching fingers. Everything smelled of warm dirt, dry grass, and sun-warmed wood. The porch creaked softly beneath each footstep, more worn now, but still solid, still faithful. It had held stories, it had held silence, and now it held the weight of years. I moved slower these days. I no longer leapt off the porch, but slid down carefully, my legs stiff in the morning. June noticed. She always noticed. She brought me softer blankets, warmed my meals just slightly, and brushed me a little longer, whispering all the while. "You've earned every comfort," she told me once, her voice gentle as a breeze. "Every one." That month, a dog arrived who didn't speak with her body. Her name was Clementine. She was small, with wiry orange fur and wide, uncertain eyes. She had been rescued from a hoarding situation. Dozens of dogs, little food, barely any touch. Clementine didn't bark. She didn't wag. She simply existed, barely. June didn't rush her. She sat nearby, left trails of treats, left space. Max and I watched. Clementine sniffed at the porch, but didn't step onto it for days. When she did, it was because she had followed a trail of chicken bits, one cautious paw at a time, until she found herself in the middle, surrounded by stillness and soft summer light. June stayed still. Clementine froze, quivering, but Max lifted his big head, yawned, and lay it back down. I didn't move at all. After a long while, Clementine curled in a tight ball at the edge of the porch, farthest from anyone. It was a beginning. The next day, she came back. June wrote her story with care. She didn't dramatize, didn't write about tragedy. She wrote about Clementine's courage. She is learning that silence doesn't mean emptiness, that touch doesn't always hurt. She is watching the world carefully. She's just looking for someone who will watch it with her. The story ran. Photos followed. Video too, just a short clip of Clementine dozing on the porch beside Max. Both of them still as stone. People called. But June waited. She needs someone who will let her take her time, she told the staff. 3 weeks later, a woman named Erica visited. She sat cross-legged on the porch for an hour. Didn't try to touch Clementine. Just sat. Her fingers drummed softly on her knee. Her breathing matched the summer wind. Clementine didn't run, didn't shake. By the end of the visit, she had crept closer. Not close, but closer. Erica returned twice more. On the third visit, Clementine licked her hand. That was all it took. Erica adopted her that day. Before they left, she knelt by June. "I've been alone a long time. We'll teach each other." Another photo went up on the wall. The porch continued. It always did. That same week, June received an invitation to speak at a National Animal Welfare Summit. The letter was formal, typed, filled with praise. They wanted her to present the Porch Project as a model of community-driven transformation. She read it aloud in the staff room. Everyone clapped. Max barked once as if to say, "About time." June looked overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say to that many people." Sherry handed her Walter's old notebook. "Just start with the truth." She left for the summit with a suitcase full of stories and a photo of me tucked into her jacket pocket. The speech took place in a large hall, lights bright, voices buzzing. She wore her porch pin over her heart. She opened with the line Walter once spoke. It all started with one dog who waited, and someone who sat beside her. She spoke about patience, about listening, about dogs that didn't fit the mold. She showed slides of the porch, of the dogs who had passed through, of the map covered in pins. The crowd stood when she finished. She returned home quiet, tired, moved. That night, we sat on the porch together. "I think I'm finally beginning to understand what Walter meant," she said. "It's not about building something perfect. It's about showing up over and over, even when it's hard." I rested my head on her knee. Callie visited more often now. She brought books for the kids. She'd started volunteering at the shelter's new after-school reading program. She helped the kids pick their books, showed them how to turn the pages slowly, and always left a dog treat tucked into her back pocket. One day, a girl named Briar chose to read to me. She sat cross-legged, a chapter book open on her lap, and stumbled through the words. Her voice was shaky at first, but it grew steadier with every sentence. "You're a good listener," she said, pausing to look at me. I licked her hand. June snapped a photo. Later, she added it to the bulletin board with the caption, "Listening is the first step to being seen." September rolled in with cooler winds. The trees began to whisper change. The dogs seemed more restless in the mornings, eager for walks, eager for the crispness in the air. Max and I spent our days mostly resting, but we always made it to the porch for at least a few hours. We greeted the new ones, offered warmth. One day, a boy named Seth came with his dad. He didn't speak much, just looked around, hands in his pockets. He'd lost his mother recently, the staff whispered. He barely ate, barely spoke. His dad thought maybe a dog would help. June brought out a quiet dog named Tumble. Tumble didn't bark, didn't pull on his leash. He just sat. So did Seth. They didn't look at each other much, but they both sat. Long after his dad left to fill out paperwork, long after the sun dipped low. When they stood, Seth touched Tumble's back, briefly. Then he whispered something no one quite caught. Tumble turned his head, licked Seth's fingers. They left together that evening. June watched them go and whispered, "Sometimes, stillness finds stillness." The shelter celebrated its 500th Porch Project adoption that fall. They hosted a small gathering, just volunteers, adopters, and a few friends. There were cookies shaped like paw prints. A new bench was added, engraved with every dog's name. A wind chime was strung between two trees and made a soft, low tone whenever it swayed. June gave a small speech. "We aren't fixing the whole world, but for 500 times, we made it better for someone. That's more than enough for today." She looked at me. I wagged. And still, the porch remained, quiet in the early hours, humming with gentle noise by afternoon. The rhythm never changed. Because even as the seasons shifted and faces came and went, the waiting never stopped. And neither did the ones willing to meet it. The air grew sharper by mid-October. The leaves along the driveway turned copper and crimson, curling and falling like quiet reminders that nothing ever stayed the same. The wind had picked up just enough to make the wind chimes above the porch sing more often. Their slow, steady music drifted through the shelter grounds and into the pens, into the hearts of dogs who didn't yet understand this place could be safe. I understood it, though. I had come to know this rhythm, the pattern of the days, the way the porch breathed in the stories of every dog who sat upon it. I moved slower now, slower than before, but I still made my way to the bench each morning, nose brushing dew-covered grass, paws careful on the weathered planks. I still waited. On one particular morning, there was a strange energy in the air. June arrived earlier than usual, her coat only half-buttoned, her hair pulled back in a quick tie. She looked around, then smiled when she saw me. "Big day," she whispered, patting my side. "New friends coming, special ones." I didn't know what she meant until the vans arrived. There were 3 of them, white with green trim and the words Hillstone Juvenile Center printed discreetly near the back bumper. The doors opened, and out came a group of teenagers, each one quiet, each one looking around as if unsure whether they belonged here. Their counselors followed close behind. One of them, a tall man named Curtis, approached June. "Thanks for having us," said. "This is new for them. A lot of them have never been near a dog before." "Not really." June nodded. "We're not here to teach them anything they don't already have inside. We just give them a space to remember." They were assigned in pairs. One boy named Darnell was matched with a large brindle mutt named Topper, who had a bark like a bass drum and the gentlest soul anyone had ever seen. Darnell was tall and quiet, his arms folded tightly across his chest. He didn't touch Topper at first, just watched him. Topper didn't mind. He flopped onto his side in the grass and closed his eyes. An hour passed before Darnell reached out. The next day, he asked for Topper by name. A girl named Melody, who hadn't spoken much since she arrived at the center, was paired with a Chihuahua named Bean. Bean had lost 2 toes on her back foot and wore a constant expression of confused wonder. Melody carried her in the crook of her arm the whole day. They sat on the far end of the porch, watching the breeze move through the trees. When it was time to go, Melody whispered, "I'll be back." She was, every week. The teens came twice a week for 6 weeks. They walked dogs, sat on the porch, helped make adoption signs, read stories. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they laughed too loud. But mostly, they learned how to sit still. Curtis came to June near the end of the program. "You should know, Hetsima," he said. "Some of them have changed more in these 6 weeks than in 6 months inside." June simply smiled. They weren't broken. They just needed a place to wait and be seen. That winter, the shelter launched a new initiative, Porch Companions. It paired long-term shelter dogs with volunteers who committed to just 1 hour a week. 1 hour to sit, to read, to simply be. Applications poured in. One man, retired and living alone, came every Tuesday at 10 to sit with a coonhound named Greta. He brought thermoses of soup and recited poetry. Greta didn't understand the words, but she leaned into the cadence of his voice. Another volunteer, a high school senior named Joey, chose a tripod husky named Frost. Joey brought homework and soft pretzels. Frost always stole a bite. Dogs, once too anxious to meet anyone, started wagging at the sight of their people. June kept track of it all. She started a new journal titled The Time Given. Each dog had a page. Each visit was marked with a small note. Some pages filled quickly, others took time, but none were left blank. One cold morning, a small girl arrived holding her grandfather's hand. Her name was Lucy. Her hair was braided in 2 long ropes, and she wore a green sweater with a stitched-on daisy. They approached June. "She lost her dog last month," the grandfather explained. "He was old. They grew up together." June knelt down. "Would you like to read to one of ours today?" Lucy nodded. She was matched with a spaniel named Darcy, who had the softest ears and the gentlest bark. Lucy sat down, opened her picture book, and began. Darcy crept closer, then laid her head in Lucy's lap. For the rest of the visit, neither moved. June wrote the moment into the newsletter that week. Sometimes grief meets grief, and they hold each other quietly, asking nothing, offering only presence. The holidays arrived. The porch was decorated with strands of lights and pine cones dipped in glitter. A volunteer hung handmade stockings along the fence with the names of every dog currently in the shelter. Cookies were baked. Warm cider offered. Kids crafted paper snowflakes and taped them to the windows. One evening, during a soft flurry of snow, June sat beside me on the porch. "I used to think this was a project," she said. "Something with a start and a finish. But I think now it's more like breathing. It just keeps going, as long as someone's willing to sit." I nestled my head on her foot. Christmas Eve came. A couple arrived just before dusk, holding hands, cheeks pink from the cold. They asked about a dog named River, a shy lab mix who hid under her blanket most days. They sat with her for nearly 2 hours. By the end, she was nestled between them, tail thumping slowly. They returned Christmas morning to take her home. June laughed when they told her. "I thought we'd be the only ones here," the man said. "We're never alone on the porch," June replied. As the year ended, the shelter reached 600 adoptions. The local paper ran a year in review featuring a double-page spread of dog portraits and short excerpts from their stories. In the center was a photo of me, sitting beside Max, the sun rising behind us. The caption read, "Waiting is not passive, it is the bravest kind of hope." New Year's Eve passed quietly. No fireworks were set off near the shelter. Volunteers knew better. Instead, paper lanterns were released into the sky, one for each dog still waiting. And on the porch, we waited with them. Just like always. January arrived quietly, wrapped in gray skies and early nights. Frost curled along the edges of the shelter windows, and the porch creaked beneath every step. Inside, the heater hummed low, blankets were folded on every bed, and soft music drifted through the halls. Outside, the wind moved in careful hushes, as if the world itself had leaned in to listen. I still came to the porch every day. My legs trembled a little more with each step, but I made them. June brought a thick mat and draped an old quilt across it. She tucked the corners just so, always humming under her breath. She never said the word, but I knew. I knew the way she looked at me now, the way she sat longer beside me, the way her hands lingered when they brushed over my coat. I wasn't afraid. Not here. Not with her. Not after everything. That first week of the year, the shelter received a letter from a woman in Montana. She'd opened a rescue center called the Porchlight Haven. She wrote, "We started with one bench, then a deck. Now we have a full porch, right by the pasture, where every animal can sit and breathe. Thank you for teaching us how to wait." June pinned the letter to the map board. She marked Montana with a gold pin, different from the rest. "This one's for you," she whispered to me. That week, Max didn't come to the porch. He stayed curled up in the staff lounge, his breathing slower, his eyes dimmer. June sat with him every evening. Volunteers stopped by one at a time. Tyler brought an old sweatshirt Max used to love, laying it gently beside him. Sherry read to him from Walter's notebook. When Max passed, he did so with his head resting on June's lap. She didn't cry loudly, just sat still for a long time, her hand moving slowly along his back. They buried him beneath the tree at the edge of the field, the one with the wind chimes. A small stone was placed there, carved with his name and a simple line. He waited beside her, always. For days afterward, the porch felt quieter, not emptier, just quieter. Dogs still came. Stories were still told. But something was different. Something had shifted, like the changing of the tide. One morning, June came to me holding a folder. She sat beside me, opened it, and laid the pages across her lap. Each one held photos, small notes, records, my records. "This," she said, "is your story, all of it. I've been collecting it for years, every day, every moment." She ran her fingers along the edge of the folder. "You've been part of over 600 adoptions. You taught every dog here how to trust. You taught every person here how to see." She smiled then, the kind that wobbled. "I think it's time we add your name to the wall." That afternoon, she held a small ceremony. Nothing big. Just staff, a few longtime volunteers, and some of the adopted families who lived nearby. They hung a framed photo on the wall. Me, sitting on the porch with Max, both of us watching the road. Beneath it, a plaque. "In honor of Willow, the dog who waited, and in doing so changed everything." They clapped. Some cried. Callie stood in the back, one hand pressed to her chest. That night, June stayed late. We sat together as the last light of day slipped behind the hills. She read a story aloud, one Walter had never finished. Then she folded the pages and set them gently beside me. "I think he'd want you to have that," she said. In the days that followed, I began to sleep more. I didn't always make it to the porch. Some mornings, June carried me, holding me close like something precious. She didn't speak much during those walks, just hummed that same quiet tune. One morning, I didn't get up. June found me still curled in my blanket, my breathing light. She sat with me, wrapped the quilt tighter, held me close. Callie came. So did Tyler, and Sherry, and Fred, and little Lucy, holding a drawing she had made of me and Max under the tree. They all sat. They all stayed. That afternoon, I drifted. The light was soft. The porch was quiet. The chimes moved gently in the wind, and I let go. The porch was still the next day, but not silent. A new puppy arrived that morning, found on the side of the road. Her ears were too big. Her tail curled in a funny way. She looked around nervously until June crouched down, held out her hand, and said, "It's okay, little one. You're safe." The puppy stepped forward, sniffed, and sat. June smiled. "You want to see the porch?" She led her up the steps. The puppy hesitated, then walked across the boards, her nails clicking. She sniffed Max's old corner, pawed at the edge of the blanket that still rested there. Then she lay down. In the coming weeks, the puppy stayed close to the porch. She watched the road. She followed June. She sat beside each new dog who arrived. They named her Fern. She didn't replace anyone. She didn't need to. She just continued the wait. And the porch lived on. Each morning it welcomed paws and feet. It held silence and joy and heartbreak. It held memory. The wind chimes sang, and far off in the field under the old tree, 2 stones rested side by side. The wind curled between them. The grass grew gently. And across the world, in places touched by stories, porches rose. Benches were placed. Dogs waited. And somewhere, always, someone sat beside them. Because one puppy had waited long ago, and someone had finally seen her, and nothing had been the same since.